Okay. All right. We are live. We are on air. This is my first one, clearly. Welcome. Hello. I was expecting something magnificent to happen when I changed from not on air to on air. Nothing happened significant. So hello. We're on air. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ben Rein. I'm a neuroscientist, and we're going to be doing a little mini series here, having various conversations about science and all different forms of it. My first guest here is Dr. Shawn Carbonell. I'm going to allow him to introduce himself in just a moment. But first, I just want to welcome you to this super platform. There are various buttons. There's a lot of things that can happen in here, but this is just going to be a casual conversation. We're just going to hang out and hopefully give you guys some good information. But if you are interested, if you have questions, you can either send them in the chat on the right of your screen. You can do the meet and greet where you can actually join us on stage here and turn on your camera or your microphone if you'd like and ask a question. Or there's also an option, it's called Super Chat, where you can typically the money you could spend money to ask a question, and it's like you're guaranteed to be answered. Typically that money goes to the creator, but if anyone chooses to do that, the money will be donated to support Shawn's cancer drug company or nonprofit, which he will explain. I will allow him to explain much better than I can. So Shawn, welcome. Thanks for being here. Why don't you introduce us to all of the things that you do, and then we'll get right into how you got there.
Okay. Thanks so much, Ben, for the invitation. Shawn Carbonell, MD, Ph.D. I'm coming to you live from sunny Redondo Beach. There's a couple of palm trees. There's the ocean. There's the ocean. This is my bedroom office. I feel very fortunate, but glad to be with you here today. Founder and CEO of Brazen Bio and Brazen Capital. We are basically a biotech startup incubator, as well as a general champion of science communication and STEM careers.
Awesome. Well, we love that. Of course, you know, I've been working with Brazen Bio, fantastic group, fantastic people, including and especially yourself, Shawn. But we'll get to all of that. There's no compensation for these kind comments. But yeah, I mean, you know, this is going to be unstructured, but I want to provide as much information and hopefully guidance for the people who are here in attendance. So why don't we start? I just want to ask you, why don't you tell the story of how you, through your research, invented a treatment for brain cancer?
Sure. Long story, but the gist of it is I was initially training to become a brain surgeon and neurosurgeon. Found a great undergraduate mentor. I went to the University of Washington, and he was one of the few neurosurgeons who had R01 funding from the NIH, and so that was very inspiring to me. And so I sort of adapted my career to be not just a neurosurgeon, but an academic neurosurgeon, where I'd also have a laboratory. And it's through those experiences really that I got exposed to the lab and really fell in love with it. And then they convinced me to do the MD PhD program, the combined program where you get an MD and a PhD. It's full scholarship, and it made me hungrier for more. And so I actually typically after you finish the MD PhD, you do a residency. So I would have been doing my neurosurgery residency afterwards, but I wanted to be the best academic neurosurgeon in the world. And so what did I do? I put that off, and I somehow got a position at Oxford University in England and did a postdoc for, it was only supposed to be a year, but it was going so well, I decided to stay for 3. And basically I made a big discovery there, which sort of derailed my entire plan initially. But I wasn't ready to accept it. So I made this discovery, publication, coverage in Nature Neuroscience, coverage in some press. Then I moved back to here in LA to start my residency at Cedars-Sinai, which had been a dream of mine, not only to be a resident, but to run a lab at the same time, be a PI of a lab. And so I was given that opportunity here. So I had everything I wanted, but then I just couldn't get this idea of this drug out of my head based on my research from Oxford. And ultimately, 4 months later, I decided to quit my residency and pursue development of that drug full time. This with no prior experience in drug development, no contacts in VC. I had no business experience. That was good. And yeah, so it was quite a learning experience. And what I found out, and this was in 2009 now, so what I found out is there's very few resources for people like that, especially back then. Still even today, but it's better. So I sort of languished in LA for 6 months before I finally, while paying Beverly Hills rent on a credit card. And then so I finally decided, I need to do something about this. And I moved up to San Francisco, got a second postdoc, and then I was able to do the proof of concept work and spin the company out of UCSF. And there's a lot in between and beyond that, but that's how I got started with it.
Well, there are a lot of questions I have about all this. It's super fascinating, and it's really interesting how you really pioneered, like you were saying, there's not a whole lot of guidance for this type of thing, right? You're identifying something brand new and trying to bring it to market and help people with it. I'm interested about 2 aspects of that. One is the actual research component. So when you were doing this research and you made this discovery, were you intending to discover a treatment? Or was it sort of just, a eureka moment? What kind of happened with that without, sparing the very intense biochemical details?
Story details. Yes, let me tell you about amino acid 561. No, so it was both really, right? Because, the mandate of a physician scientist is to advance human health, advance medicine. And so ironically, my mentors, although they had NIH-funded labs, I didn't see a lot of translating happening. And so that always sort of bothered me. And so I knew from the start that I would be more hands-on and I would try to actively get things to patients. I didn't know if that would be through commercialization or development through the academic center and then commercialization. I didn't know the mechanics of it, but I knew I wanted to not just do research, basic research. I wanted to bring that out of the lab into patients to affect their lives. And so that's sort of how it happened.
The other question that I wanted to ask is, I understand, like you mentioned, you want to be the best physician scientist, or I think you said I want to be the best neuroscientist.
Academic neurosurgeon, yeah.
Academic neurosurgeon in the world. I respect and, I can understand that ambition. And I want to ask you, as a person who's done so many things, you've been in academia, you've been in the clinical side, I can only imagine making that decision to commit yourself to pursuing this drug and trying to bring it to market. What was that decision like, and how did you kind of decide, like, what ultimately pushed you over that barrier of like, this is what I want to do with my life, even though I have so many good options?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was pretty agonizing, really, right? Because I'd been training ever since I was 19. I knew I wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and then did the MD Ph.D., did this postdoc. I even had champagne problems, but I even turned down a faculty position at Oxford because, my work went so well there that they're like, stay and become faculty. And I'm like, whoa, okay, well, I can be an Oxford Don now too. So it's sort of, I had so many, I was fortunate to have so many opportunities. And yeah, so it was very difficult. So, saying no to the Oxford position was difficult first, but I knew that if I didn't try surgery, I might regret it. And so I had to pursue it. And, maybe I had some thought that, I could always go back to Oxford. But yeah, so I just made that decision. I'm just going to stick with neurosurgery. My chairman has offered me my own laboratory and basically a $250,000 startup, just like any other faculty member, and I'm going to see how it works. But so what ultimately happened was the clinic kicked my butt, and I was working beyond the allotted hours that are considered legal, and it broke me down because it was a malignant culture on top of the long hours. And even though my chairman was gung-ho about me doing this research, none of the other faculty were. And so they would give me no consideration in that regard. So I just basically didn't have time to do what I wanted to do, which is a shame because, if they did, who knows where things could have gone. I could have developed it through academia and still be a neurosurgeon. But yeah, so this is the way the cookie crumbles. Basically, I got burned out within 4 months of the clinical side, and decided, what, I can have more impact if I develop this drug than I can with my own two hands. And for me, again, if you look at my entire career, it's been an evolution of seeing how much more impact I can have with my time. And so I'm always trying to maximize that. And so at that particular time, from neurosurgery to academic neurosurgery to developing this drug, that was the next level of having as much impact as possible. Of course, I had no guarantees I'd succeed, but I had to go for it.
Well, it's a courageous adventure that you went on, and I think it's going very well, as we'll get into. One of the things about this, so this entire thing, this live event, as I've described, I'm sort of approaching it as a podcast. But one of the great things about this is that when you listen to a podcast, you're listening to something that took place weeks before, most likely. This is a live event. There are people here asking questions. And we got a question. I was going to ask about it, but I wasn't sure if people were interested. So Yana asked, could you please tell us more details about the discovery? How did Dr. Shawn come to it from the scientific side? So people are interested in this. I'm interested in this as well. So again, without the details too much, but maybe a little bit about like what sort of, were you looking at cells in culture? Were you applying different drugs, or were you targeting a specific mechanism through various approaches? What sort of got you to that discovery?
Yeah, that's a great question. I haven't talked about this much, but yeah. So I had great mentors in science, right? My first mentor, the neurosurgeon Sean Grady, he taught me so much about science and grants and the scientific process. And his lab was very focused on. I was fortunate; his lab was very focused on function. So like they're interested in memory after traumatic brain injury. And so not only did I have to deal with, sort of the molecular side and the cellular side, but we also went all the way to the ultimate function of the brain, which is memory, which I thought was really cool. So there's a really cool multimodal project, which is great exposure because I do get a little skeptical when people only work with cell cultures or only with animal models. And so that was the context. And then beyond that, basically, I think I got this from my MD Ph.D. program because they had these MD Ph.D. mentors, these physician scientists who were practicing physician scientists, come in and talk about their scientific process. And it gave me a good sort of frame of reference. A lot of basic science is bottom up. You're starting with a protein and then you figure out the function and do mutations and things like that. All focused on that protein. But again, I wanted to have sort of an immediate, I always wanted to keep an immediate eye on translation. And so again, I was looking more at the patient level. And so I tended to take a top-down approach. And so when I was at Oxford, I took that, I basically executed on that by starting with human tissue from the disease of interest, as well as animal tissue from the disease of interest. Because you may know in the UK, they have pretty strict animal rights laws or animal use laws in research. And so I couldn't even touch a mouse for 9 months. But yet I was there to do a postdoc. And so the only material I could get was human material or already dead animal material. And so that's how I started. And all I did was start observing, right? I just started noting relationships between the tumor cells and other aspects of the brain. And the paper that I wrote ultimately was the vascular basement membrane as soil for brain metastasis. What I discovered just by looking at human tissue, and it had been observed before, but we found a mechanism for it. What we discovered is that these tumor cells that metastasize to the brain are always like 97% associated with the vasculature of the brain. And so from there, I was like, okay, well, what's on the outside of of these vessels, and it turned out to be a lot of extracellular matrix, all CSPGs. There's a lot of stuff, but here's where bias can be good. I actually I did my PhD with Rick Horwitz, who's a major cell biologist, was the executive director of the Allen Institute for Cell Science up in Seattle, funded by Paul Allen. He's since retired, but he discovered beta-1 integrin, which is one of the key adhesion molecules. And so, I just thought, there's laminin, there's fibronectin, there's collagen on the outside of these cells. Let's just try the integrins, because they're what those extracellular matrix proteins are what the integrins attach to. And so I just did some initial screens, and it turned out to be dominantly the beta-1 variant. Anyways, so I took a top-down approach, combined with my biases, luck, and this unique access to human tissue, came up with a hypothesis again in human tissue, and then went bottom up from there. Then I showed the mechanism in vitro. I verified it in vivo, blocked it in vivo, and then so we had the full story from cells to human tissue. Ultimately, this still breaks my heart, but it almost got published in Cell, but one reviewer wasn't having it, so and I was trying to get out of there, so we published in PLOS One. But anyways, it was like everything sort of aligned. There's a lot of luck involved, and being in that lab with Rick Horwitz back at University of Virginia was really formative. So a lot of luck involved, but I did sort of take the cues and ran with it. And luckily, there was faculty at Oxford as well that could help me out with the human tissue and everything else. Long story, but.
Well, that was the short version of it. I'm sure is an incredibly long story in real time. Two questions. Are you the first author of that paper?
Yes.
Okay.
I was hired as a senior postdoctoral fellow. So I led the project. I was in charge of brain metastasis at that center, and in fact, I was able to hire a technician under me as well. So I was in sort of a junior faculty type position as it was. So I was very fortunate to get that because I had the MD PhD.
And what year was that published in?
That was it's PLOS One, Carbonell et al. 2009.
Right, there it is.
Vascular basement membrane and soil. Yep.
I just put it in the chat. I'm going to read that paper. I'm actually going to save this to my own personal notes, because I'm dying to go and read that paper and learn more about all this. But I just wanted to point out something interesting in that story. You're talking about how, your bias came into play, and bias can be a good thing. It's really funny because I tend to feel the same way, where like, oh, I've previously studied this one system in the brain. And so you tend to be biased and think that system must be involved in everything. And whenever you discover a new problem and you're trying to, find a new solution for it, you immediately think of that thing. And it feels wrong. It feels wrong because it's like you're assuming too much. But at the same time, while you're describing this, I'm thinking, maybe it's not wrong. Maybe it's actually a really great thing. That's what science really should be all about, is applying your expertise to tackle new problems. And, maybe you had that hypothesis, maybe you tested it and it hadn't worked, right? And you were totally wrong. Whatever, that's fine. I think it's still important to work on those things that you know a lot about. So I want to move into the next step of your journey and talk about how you went from, this peer-reviewed scientific manuscript, scientific, wet lab finding, and turn it into something that's now in clinical trials. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are not only interested in that because it's, maybe they have a drug that they're thinking about doing the same kind of thing. And, like you said, there aren't a whole lot of resources out there to talk about how this is done or any clear instructions, but also just, it's an amazing story. I would love to hear about how this all went down and what you learned throughout it.
Sure. Another long story to summarize.
Sorry for all the long stories.
Yeah. No, I'll try to put it into bite-sized bits because so to help with comprehension. But so this was again 2008, 2009. So I moved to LA in 2009. This was a period when Facebook was really popular. When I still remember the day I signed up for Facebook. I was pretty over it because, Friendster sort of fizzled. MySpace was kind of interesting, good for music discovery. But then Facebook came around, and I was like, another one of these. But it became actually the currency of social life at Oxford, which is really cool. And then, of course, the meteoric rise of the company. And so everyone was very Silicon Valley obsessed. Then, of course, the economic downturn. But I was caught up in that. I knew that I wanted to get a therapy to patients. And so I just sort of took that interest in startups and entrepreneurship and said, okay, well, this is how I'm going to do it. I didn't realize, I'd end up quitting neurosurgery to do so. That's just how things ended up based on my realities at the time. But that's basically how it happened. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, I sort of languished here in LA because there's literally no resources around here. And so I moved up to San Francisco very deliberately, obviously, because it's the birthplace of biotech and venture capital. And so, and Facebook was up there. And so, I gotten some luck. I found a job in the neurosurgery department doing a postdoc where I could study exactly what I wanted to do to get this drug done. I didn't tell the PI that at the beginning, but so I sort of slid in there with ulterior motives. But obviously, I'm Oxford trained. I have an MD Ph.D. just like he did. So thankfully, I got that job pretty quickly. And so I was able to do this work. And then, as things as my hypotheses seemed to be panning out, I was like, I told him, I'm thinking about starting a company. And we had a collaborator in the radiation oncology department, and she had studied the same molecule, beta-1 integrin, and she had done some breast cancer work. And she was mentored by a very famous cell biologist, Mina Bissell, who's at Berkeley, who also studies the same molecule. She has a really popular TED Talk that has millions of views. I recommend seeing that. But also, but basically, it was the perfect place. Again, a lot of luck. It was a perfect place to do this. And as soon as we got the positive data, I was like, all right, how do I start a company? And so, luckily, I was at UCSF. They had already done a couple incubators for faculty and students who wanted to start companies. And so I lucked out and got into one of those. It's called Idea to IPO. This was in December of 2009 or maybe 2010 at this point. But it was basically a crash course in how to start a biotech startup. And, the teacher was a venture capitalist, and he brought in other venture capitalists. And it was very formative, and I model some of what we do today at Brazen Bio after that, and that basically launched the company. I was fortunate to pick my co-founder well, in that she had a rich uncle, and so we again, more luck. We were able to raise $2.5 million within the first 6 months. So I didn't even have to go the venture capital route. Which is completely unusual. Even today, that's not a bankable way to do things. Again, a lot of luck, a lot of just good timing. But again, Brazen Bio is trying to sort of formalize that. But that's how it started. We can stop there or keep going.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, there's a lot to this story. One thing that really strikes me when you're describing this is you keep making references to the amount of luck that you had. And, I think you should give yourself more credit, right? There's luck, but also you've done a great job. But I want to emphasize this point of like how many barriers there were between you as a scientist who discovered this thing that could actually treat people, help people with brain cancer, the number of barriers between you and bringing that drug to market, and how much luck and perseverance and struggle you probably had to go through to make that happen. And, I think modern science is a miracle. It's incredible, the things that we're capable of doing, but people don't maybe realize the difficulty for those things to go from discovery to, bench to bedside, as we say. So it's miraculous that this stuff even happens. And I'm sure that there are many things that happen in there that were frustrating, right? Like difficult bureaucratic type of stuff that could have gotten in the way. So
for sure.
Yeah. So we should talk more about Brazen Bio and the type of stuff you're doing. That we'll get there in a second. But the other thing I just want to point out is another thing that I really noticed about you. You have this quality of altruism. I really feel that, and whatever. I'll tell everyone we've known each other for a little while now, outside of this live event. And I've always felt that you're really driven by this motivation to improve the world and help people's lives, make the world a better place. And I wanted to ask you, how much do you feel that your life has been guided by that motivation?
It's a great question. Thank you for that. It's what fuels me in the morning, right? Because I've been fortunate in my life to have all these opportunities. MD Ph.D. program, full ride. That's amazing. Like, I don't have any debt from med school. This position at Oxford, the position I got at Cedars-Sinai for neurosurgery. Sorry, I'm shaking the screen here. So I'm very fortunate. And when I was in OncoSynergy as well, I was making six figures. So very fortunate. And so I've seen what money definitely doesn't buy you happiness. And so what for me, what brings me happiness is having the most impact possible, and being able to use my skills in a meaningful activity to make that to happen. Because I left OncoSynergy. We can talk about that later, but I left OncoSynergy in 2019 because frankly, I got burned out. It was a very difficult decade. Also some sort of personal issues with my marriage that we don't have to get into, or we can. But it was a really tough time. I was completely burned out. And so we got to clinic, FDA cleared us to start phase 1 clinical trial just in the nick of time because I was ready to leave. And so, I had so much, but obviously the money doesn't make you happy. So, I could right now, get a job in industry and make a lot of money, but that's again, I want to have the most impact with my time as possible. So I started this nonprofit. It was the first thing I did after I left OncoSynergy. Pandemic has made it very difficult to raise funds, of course, but we are kicking along thanks to donations from all y'all. And then again, I was thinking again, how can I have the most impact? I almost started another company, right? In the fall 2020, I got a Y Combinator interview, all that stuff. But then I realized, we've seen this movie before, and so I realized I didn't want to do that. But with my unique skill set, having done it, and my interest in helping other people, I said, why start one company? Let's start 1,000 companies. And so I went to the other side of the table. I've become a venture capitalist. I'm starting a biotech incubator. And now I'm helping other people, especially scientists, do what I've done, which is bring their research out of the lab into the real world.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, and I know all about Brazen Bio. I want to kind of wrap up the whole OncoSynergy, cure glioblastoma, and then move into the Brazen Bio stuff. But in that, I also want to discuss, continue to discuss this path that you chose, right? And so Milan asked, what was the driver behind you joining industry as opposed to academia? And I wanted to sort of couple that question with what I just asked you of like, is it this drive for impact? Did you have a revelation where you discovered that by actually bringing a drug that can treat brain cancer to market, I may be able to have a greater impact than any other type of career in academia? And hello, welcome to my dog.
Hey, Zoe. Yes.
I'll let you answer this.
Good girl, Zoe. Good girl. Yeah. So the short answer is yes. I would have done whatever it took to get this to patients, and so I felt commercialization would be the best route. I was jaded and cynical about academia as an undergraduate, mainly based on some experience. Again, my mentor was amazing. Sean Grady was amazing, but dealing with the politics in academia and sort of the backstabbing, I saw it firsthand because, I was fortunate again as an undergraduate to publish 3 first author papers with that neurosurgeon. And so when one of his buddies called up and asked him why he was publishing this paper, which attacked his work, and then it became a big stink, leading to me being ignored at national conferences by some of the leaders. I was like, this might not be for me. So I know other people have seen stuff like that, and that's just unfortunate. And of course, I stayed in academia for at least another decade. So it didn't completely ruin things, but I felt at the time, especially with sort of the startup wind in my sales, that going to industry would be faster. Ultimately, it probably wasn't, but we'll never know.
Sorry. Sorry, my dog has decided at this moment to go absolutely bananas. Let me, and sorry for her joining us rudely.
Shall I recite a poem?
So let me ask you this. You talked about OncoSynergy, which is the company you were leading that you really built, right? That where you're bringing this drug to market and you're trying to get this drug through clinical trials and to help people. And then you also have Cure Glioblastoma. Can you tell me a little bit tell all of us about that nonprofit?
Yes. So Cure Glioblastoma. So this sort of tells you, the kind of cool stuff that happens out of science and communication. I'd always known I wanted to start a nonprofit for brain cancer, just because I felt the frustration of how long it takes to develop a drug. So obviously at least 10 years, and literally it took me 10 years just to get the idea to phase 1. So we're not in the market. We're just in phase 1 clinical trials, still have 2 and 3 to go. Although, who knows, we could become an acquisition target for a bigger pharma down the road. That's not for me to decide. But where was I going with that? I totally lost my train of thought.
It happens to the best of us. Sorry, I'm over here defending myself from my violent dog who's jumping and biting. Really going after me.
Poor Zoe. I forgot what I was talking about.
You were talking about phase 1 trials and
So the nonprofit. So basically, when I decided to leave the company, luckily put together an amazing team, and they're still together, and they're kicking butt, which I'm really proud of them. And so kudos to them. The first thing I decided to do, as I mentioned earlier, was to start this nonprofit because, again, I was frustrated with how long it takes to get drugs to patients, and I wanted to try to figure out ways I can expedite that in other ways, whether helping people get into clinical trials and things like that. So sort of all the other stuff. But at the same time, I still wanted to do my research, continue my research in glioblastoma. And so, again, as mentioned, the pandemic has sort of put a damper on things and our ability to raise real capital, although we are alive and kicking, thankfully. So we do have a laboratory. So our main endeavor at the moment is we do have our own laboratory. We do have our own research in Torrance at Biolabs, and we've made 2 discoveries that are patentable, that are have patent applications pending. Discovered a new antibody discovery platform, as well as doing some immunotherapy research for glioblastoma. So that's the majority of what we're doing, and that takes up the majority of the money. But what we'd love to do once we can raise a little bit more money is to, again, do some more patient-facing things, and sort of we want to sort of do things that other organizations aren't doing. So there's a ton of things we could do, but we just haven't been able to get there yet.
Well, that's amazing. I can't even imagine what your mind looks like. I was going to say what your schedule looks like, but really what your mind looks like. Both. You're working on so many things, and like I said, I've always noticed that quality about you, that drive to help people and make the world better. And it just seems like you've really found a way to find traction in a multitude of areas where you're really making a difference in so many ways. And I genuinely mean that. It's amazing. We haven't even talked about Brazen Bio yet. Maybe it's now time to transition. Brazen Bio is such a cool thing. For those who aren't familiar, I'll give first an introduction, then Shawn can correct everything I say that's wrong. So it's a biotech startup incubator. I hope at least those first 3 words I got right.
Indeed.
Where people are encouraged to apply to this program, where if you have a biotech startup that you're looking to build, you have an idea, or you have something more solid, then you can join Brazen Bio in Los Angeles. Well, you give the specific details and essentially get support. You'll first get space to do your research. You'll get support on how to build your startup and ongoing support. And I just think it's such a cool idea because like we've talked about several times already, there is such little guidance. You can't just Google like how to start a biotech startup. And for you to have gone through that experience, maybe you can, I don't know, I assume you can't, but for you to have gone through that experience of creating yours and then to now want to give back that education and how to, go through that process, I think it's great. That's something I'm really, really all about. I try to spend a good amount of my energy on social media informing people about like how to take the path through science, various science careers, because it's not so straightforward. And I see a lot of that in what you're doing with Brazen Bio. So I really think it's amazing. And it's also just really exciting. I think there's so many cool projects going on within Brazen Bio. So please tell me, correct everything I got wrong, and maybe just do a better job of introducing Brazen Bio and describing what kind of things are going on there around now or in the past.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I mean, obviously social media is how we met, and we vibed on the same theme. So I applaud the work that you're doing as well. And that's why we love working with you. So yeah, Brazen Bio, we have three sort of tracks that we're interested in. The first thing, which Ben mentioned, is our startup incubator, the Brazen Incubator. And it's unique in the fact that we have the first biotech launch house in the world. So I'm in it. Again, that's Redondo Beach, 5 blocks away. There's a jacuzzi down there. I might be in there later tonight. So yeah, so you come live with us. You don't have to, but you can come live with us. The beach is 5 blocks away. The lab is 5 miles away. It's sort of perfect location. This is South Bay in LA, just south of the airport. And so basically I'm building the program I wish I had 10 years ago when I was starting my startup, right? And so it's sort of like Y Combinator, plus you get the house, plus you get access to lab space. Plus now we have a venture capital fund, and we're able to invest in these companies. And what we really want to do, our mandate is being founder friendly first. So it's really about finding good people who want to sort of finding more Bens and Shawns in the world who want to do more with their research by giving patients access to the technology. So that's really what our mandate is. But alongside that, I've seen it as an opportunity to also help people with careers and science communication, because again, I've got my arms in that as well. I've had multiple careers, and so the idea was, it would be nice if we can aggregate sort of all the STEM careers under one umbrella. And so, like I said, we are trying to encourage people to go into STEM. We have a Discord. We're going to start to do events once things open up. We have this Brazen Creator program for science communication, where Brazen Bio is partnering with different creators like yourself. And so far we have 4, and we should have double that within a month. Just encouraging people, science creators, to keep doing what they're doing. But yeah, so that it's all encompassing. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's science communication, STEM careers, and startups all under one roof. And we see it as an ecosystem we're trying to build here in LA. That's about it.
One of the things you mentioned in there was the Discord server, and I'm a part of that. I'm a moderator on there.
Yes, thank you.
Of course, it's my pleasure. So, we're working together in. I have a video series called Science Tips. And just in case anyone's watching this who doesn't know, I also, aside from being a scientist, I post videos on social media, typically 60-second or so educational clips. And I've been doing this series called Science Tips, where I basically do a lot of what you're doing, Shawn, where I've been through this before, and you may not have been, and it's very complicated. My dog's back for more. So let me explain how to, get into grad school, apply to whatever, write personal statements, things like that. And the Discord is essentially a hub for that type of thing. It's a hub for information transfer and guidance. So if you could sort of maybe describe what the Discord's like and what your vision is for that. And once again, I'll just be over here defending myself from my dog.
So he behaved. Yeah. So the Discord is just getting started. We're just bringing people in. We're trying to growth hack and make people more aware of it. Obviously, we have it in our LinkedIn bios and such. But I envision it again as sort of the home of Brazen Bio on the web. where people can come together. And, you know, it's sort of the way I explained it to you when we first met was, you know, we get a lot of questions in DMs, and oftentimes that can be overwhelming. And I always try to make time to answer them. But wouldn't it be great if we had a place where online where we could sort of aggregate that so that certain answers already existed, and then people can interact with it with each other as well as with us who have been through it. And so that's the main that's the initial idea. And we've been fortunate to bring on a new person, Rachel, who's heading our marketing and community. And so she's gonna basically take on the Discord and schedule events, sort of things like this, but on the Discord server on our stage, with our past companies, with, you know, Brazen creators, and go from there. But one of the latest things we've done is we just, you know, inspired by our mutual friend Kristen at TikTok, formerly at TikTok. She did an anonymous salary survey, which went super viral, got almost 60,000 responses, I believe. So we're doing something similar with her blessing in STEM. And so we have the link in the Discord. And so we're trying, and so, you know, it's got a little more information so that we can sort of, you know, academia versus industry, and sort of really tease out salary transparency in the STEM fields. So it's turning out to be pretty interesting. So these are some of the things that we're working on. It's just getting started. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and it's, you know, maybe as a viewer in this event, you might be thinking like, oh, it's just, I don't want to give an impression that I'm like, oh, that you're doing the Discord and you're doing this thing, and like getting people to traffic into those things. The reason I'm mentioning these things is because they're actually genuinely beneficial and helpful for people. And I think it's great. And you know, I assume people are here not only because they're interested in your story, but also because they're looking for resources to help them. And a big thing that we've been focusing on is this idea of like information sharing and essentially mentorship, right? Being a person who has been through something and sharing what that experience is like with tips to the next person going through that. And, you know, it's tough in science because if you want to be an academic scientist or an industry scientist, or, you know, create your own company like you have, or there's all these different things you can do. And the only way to really learn about how to proceed through that career is by speaking with someone who's already done it. So if you want to be an academic scientist, you have to pretty much go to your professor's office hours and ask them these questions. But there aren't really enough relevant resources on the internet where you can like type in a question and find the answer. And it's also very different for everyone. Everyone's journey is a bit different. So I think the Discord is really a great resource because it's a place where people can log on and immediately enter essentially office hours for a professor, but with people from all different backgrounds in science. You know, there are entrepreneurs and there are industry people and postdocs, grad students, undergrads. It's great. And it's just to have that welcoming, accessible environment for asking questions is what science really needs. So I actually do hope that people join in there and get more involved.
Zoe does too. I like the office hours analogy. That's great. But yeah, so it's a place where you get access to Ben and I and all the other mods that are in there, most of whom are creators.
My dog just won't stop. I left her home all day and I knew it was going to be a disaster. And I'm just, it's awful. So I want to ask you a question. This is actually, I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I want to know.
Okay.
You know, you've been an academic scientist, you've published. I want to ask you, what do you think is, you know, coming for science? Do you think that science as a field will look the same in 10 years? Do you think that academic publishing or, you know, peer reviewed, like Cell, Nature, all those journals will still be the same? Do you think that academic grant funding will be the same? Like, do you feel like science is sort of in for some change, or do you think it's kind of solidified the way it is?
I think it's primed for disruption, and I intend to be one of the disruptors. Let's put it at that. So this is the 5-10-year vision of Brazen Bio is the Brazen Institute, where we have, it's sort of a vertically integrated institute where we have academic laboratories who are translationally minded next to the entrepreneurial engine in our startup incubator, next to biotech manufacturing and clinical trials. So literally there's going to be a hospital there. So this is my vision for Brazen Bio, is just to recreate it from the ground up. And so, yeah, so that's a 10-year vision. And in fact, it was my 10-year vision 20 years ago. So I have not reached it yet, but that was pretty audacious. So you know, I had that bad political experience in undergraduate, dealing with the rogue PIs from the other institutions, and I was like, there's got to be a better way that, you know, this politics and stuff isn't such a downer, because I've seen so many students leave science, and especially early in the college years, because of things like this, because of one poor experience. And so I think it's ripe for disruption. And again, I think a lot of there are movements on Twitter and things like that, different ways of having science. There's DAOs and all this stuff now, which is really crazy. I'm not up to that level, but certainly I think change is coming, especially with there's so many barriers to entry, and I think there's no need for it, because ultimately, you know, people should be able to do the science that makes them happy, that can contribute to the world, and we should just let them.
I agree, and I sincerely hope that the type of work that both of us are doing, you know, it may seem silly to traditional academics, but posting things on Instagram and TikTok, you know, I really feel that that is the future of science. I think right now, academic science is sort of like Twitter centric. You know, people like really use Twitter a lot. And when I've actually been informed by some colleagues of mine who are applying to faculty positions at, you know, prestigious universities, the universities are asking for their Twitter page, not because they want to do a background check on them, because they want to know, do you have a substantial Twitter following? Do people listen to you? Because that's a pro these days. And, you know, I think Twitter is good. It's all text-based. That's what scientists are used to, right? That's how we do our science in text format. We publish manuscripts, and we do reviews through there. But video-based content is kind of like the next step. And I hope that the stuff that you and I are doing, and like what you're doing with the creator program, building opportunities for scientists to get out there and speak on the internet, is so important. And not only because science is amazing and it should be shared with the general public, you know, and it should be broken down into bite-sized pieces that are interpretable to the lay person, but also because there's a whole bunch of misinformation out there, and having more, you know, knowledgeable voices to combat those things is really important. So I agree. Definitely the field is primed for some change. It's kind of, I wanted to know if you would agree with me. I never asked you that question outside of this either, but another thing that you touched on is the issue of people having bad experiences in science. And it's a unique career in that when you join a research lab for your PhD, let's say, you take some classes the first couple of years typically, and then eventually you run out of classes and you shift to a research focus. And so a large part of the PhD is exclusively working with the same one lab that is led by the same one person. And there's no real process to vet those people who are leading the labs to tell if they're good people or not, you know, and there are bad people out there who, you know, take advantage of students and do things that, whatever, you know, a good boss shouldn't do. And there aren't really the same protections in academia that there are in like a corporate setting, right? It's kind of a strange beast. So it is really, really sad and unfortunate to see people have bad experiences with others, really social experiences in academia. And but I think that more of that is coming to the light now. People are taking it a little bit more seriously, and people are getting canceled for doing things like that. So maybe yes. Maybe things will change. But
yeah. I agree with that. Sorry to interrupt. Like it kind of bothers me that, you know, that this is sort of the narrative on social media. You know, the fact that we need to focus on sort of mental health and stuff like that. You know, so that's sort of what predominates right now. And so the stuff that you and I do, we can sort of put more balance. Certainly people who are having trouble need the help, but it does seem to be currently dominated by a lot of negative experiences. So hopefully we can change that.
I sure hope so. And by the way, I will encourage everyone here, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, because I have one more question for Shawn, and then we'll feel free to conversate. But if you have questions, now's a good time to ask them. So Shawn, I wanted to ask you, and of course, like I said, we can continue, but you've done a lot of things in your life. You've been a brain surgeon. You have been
Almost.
a brain surgeon in training. You have been a PhD student. You've made amazing discoveries in the lab. You've brought those things through the process of reaching clinical trials. Now you're doing venture capital stuff, and you're leading Brazen Bio. And what I want to ask you is, out of all these things that you've been involved in, what have you found to be the most fulfilling?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I think we sort of already went over it, right? At each, those were everything has been an evolution. Again, neurosurgery to academic neurosurgery to the startup, 10 years of my life, to the nonprofit, and now to Brazen Bio. It was all about increasing the impact that I could have on the world. And so they've all been fulfilling, but obviously because I've moved on to do the next thing, the latest thing I'm doing is sort of really fulfilling. I'll say that. I want to put that aside, but I'll also say that, the past 7 years I've been on Instagram doing science communication has been really fulfilling. It sort of opened up this creative side of me that I never sort of let see the light of day, being a serious scientist and entrepreneur. But, it's led to, our relationship, my founders in my nonprofit I met on Instagram, so many opportunities. It's that has been really fulfilling. It's really cool to see, and we talked about this before, but, someone that followed me in 2015 as an undergrad, and this has happened more than once, writes me a DM out of the blue 4 years later and says, I got into an MD PhD program and I was inspired by you. That's so cool. And so that's how I keep my balance. Cause I've got big aspirations for sure. And I'm just getting started. But seeing that at that level is really cool. And then, these platforms like TikTok, where the platform is just crazy, because it took me 7 years to get 10,000 people on Instagram to follow, whereas it took me only about a year to get 500,000 on TikTok. So the reach there is crazy. Of course, it's different algorithms and such, but again, there where I do my vaccine work, and it's just dozens and dozens of comments that say, I got my booster because of you. I was able to convince my parents to get the booster because of these videos. That's really rewarding. And so that's great. That's great fuel. Now, and so that's why that is integral to what I'm doing at Brazen Bio, because I think it goes hand in hand. We're in a digital media age now. I think every company needs to be a media company. And yeah, so that's that. And so I think the best is yet to come, and Brazen Bio is just getting started. We haven't closed our first close of our venture capital fund yet, but I expect to in the next few weeks. Then we can start deploying that. And, we had great success with our first batch in Brazen Bio, 4 excellent companies, 6 awesome founders, 3 of the 4 teams had female founders, which is another thing we're trying to encourage. 1 raised money in the middle of the batch, which is fantastic. The other 2 are raising right now, and the other one is still slightly embryonic. But yeah, and again, that is sort of like on a one-to-one level, just seeing these founders go from this crazy idea to incorporating their company and raising their first rounds of funding. It's really rewarding, and it's exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And by the way, for the people who aren't familiar, I just put Shawn's handle for TikTok and Instagram in the chat. So he was talking about on TikTok the vaccine videos. So what he did was he actually took his own blood and showed the whole process, took his own blood samples and measured his COVID antibodies before and after, I think, the second dose. And then you also did the booster, or did you also do the first dose?
I did first dose as well. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah. And it's amazing. I mean, I watched it and I was like, wow, this is, if anybody sees this, this is the most clear evidence that they can have that, it actually does increase antibody levels. And it was unbelievable too. I mean, there's a whole interesting story there. You had to optimize your assay, right? Because after getting the booster, your antibody levels were like 400 times the baseline level, right? And it like couldn't even
400%. Yeah. So it
yeah.
was beyond the linear range of the assay, so I had to shift it up. But yeah, so I mean, I thought the amount of antibodies after the first 2 doses was high, but you know, it was 4 to 6 times higher after the booster, which is really incredible. And you know, I went into this just trying to convince myself, because like I was kind of skeptical about RNA vaccines. I know that they'd been around, and I know they failed in cancer. Because cancer is, you know, a little more complex than virus, a lot more complex. And so, yeah, it really came out of me wanting to convince myself, and hey, I've got this platform, why not share it? And so yeah, I mean, even if the results didn't go that way, I would have said, okay, well, this doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, no, it was really cool. And I find myself not really truly citing the data from your videos, but I think about it all the time. I'm like, wow, you know, this. And I ask myself these questions of like, how does it, you know, the antibody levels really explode, and then how do they go down from there? And, you know, you really show it over time. You do multiple follow-ups. So it's just a really cool thing to check out if you haven't yet. There are 2 questions in the chat that I want to address. One question is, what job would Shawn do if he couldn't do science or medicine? That's a tough one.
Whoa.
Hard to imagine, right?
Yeah. I mean, I suppose I have a creative side, so it would be in that realm. So, you know, maybe I'm not making science content. Maybe I'm still a creator, though. I have a quirky, very weird personality, and it's coming out more in my TikTok videos, as you will see. And believe me, just strap in. But yeah, so I can see myself continue to create. I also play guitar and stuff like that, so maybe music. But and that's if, you know, I was not able to go into a lab and do science or anything, or even talk about science. I do have a creative side in music, and I remember in high school, and this was in the 90s. I was in the video. I took video production twice and photography twice, because I just enjoyed it so much. So I think I could do something creative like that.
Yeah, well, hopefully that never happens, that you'll be exiled from the scientific community and not allowed to speak about science or think about science.
Yikes.
The other question is, what did the next 10 years look like for both of you? And I will let you go first. And I would really I'd love to know. You know, I understand the mission of Brazen Bio, and you have very clear goals for all of these things that you're working in. But I suppose, you know, I guess maybe you can define those goals so that people can clearly understand them if they don't already. And then if there's anything else new that maybe is coming and not secret.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we talked about the startup stuff. So I'd love to help hundreds of founders start companies based on their research. Full stop there. I'd also love to encourage. I want to make science. I want to help make science cool. And so, you know, again, we've got the Discord, you know, with our content, and I want to sort of expose the younger generations to the different possibilities in science. There's so much you can do in science, from the engineering side all the way to like manufacturing. There's some cool science in manufacturing science, biotechnology, working with these vats of cells and such. There's so much opportunity, and that's just exploding. We have, you know, the biotech meets and all that stuff. So I just want to, again, just create a platform where we can inspire the next generation of STEM leaders, the next generation of science communicators, and the next generation of scientist CEOs.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I really hope that, I'm confident, and not that I hope, I'm very confident that will be the case. And as far as myself, I actually really don't know, Miriam. It's a really great question. For a long time, I've been really interested in academia. You know, I've always set my intentions very directly on being a professor and running my own research lab. And the reason for that was because I love to teach. I love to educate and mentor. And I also love science. And and I still love science, and I still love to educate, but I'm finding that I can do at least the education part online and in a very robust manner. You know, I can have a TikTok video that reaches a single TikTok video that reaches 10 times, 100 times more people than I will ever teach formally as a professor in an academic setting. So hopefully my TikToks are good, that the information is actually accurate and meaningful and helpful. But, you know, I'm considering all options, and, you know, oh, it's John F. TikToks are great. He said, thank you very much, John. But I share a lot of this, thank you. I share a lot of this feeling that you have, that has driven you of, I'm very driven by impact, you know, and clearly I guess that statement in itself tells that I want to teach a lot of people. I want to touch a lot of lives, and I want to make the world a better place. So whatever allows me to do that, will be the best option for me. And it's tough, you know, it's sort of a trade-off. It's like, how do I decide what's the best thing? How can I help the most people? So that's why I was really interested in your experience with making that decision and kind of finalizing that. But it's interesting because you didn't finalize it. You went through that process, you know, you committed to OncoSynergy and you built it and you succeeded and you continue to succeed with it. But now you're also branching out into an entirely new thing and finding new ways to succeed and help people. So I think that's pretty inspiring and maybe an educational moment for myself to realize that, you know, it's never really the end unless you become a professor. Then, then you get tenure and it really is the end.
Yeah.
No, but I guess there's still ways to
tweed jacket and a smoking pipe. That's a great lesson. I mean, that's, you know, getting out of the academic mindset was tough. You know, I was married to it for 20 years and broke free and just saw all the opportunities. I think it's still a great opportunity to be in academia. I mean, what a great place to be. We're both products of that. But, you know, let's a Gary V quote that I love is, you know, changing your mind is a strength, especially if it makes you happier. So.
Yeah, you're a big Gary V fan. You know, fun fact about Shawn, it's not a secret fact anymore, but he's a big Gary V fan, and he got me started on Gary V. And it's just he's a really inspiring guy. You know, he's not a little controversial, but some people are iffy on him. But I find his content to be very inspiring and motivating. So if people have questions, please leave them in the chat. One of the features of this platform, the super platform, is that people can, like I said in the beginning, people can join on stage, because Shawn and I are both on stage now. People can come up and ask a question. You can turn on your camera and ask the question. You can turn on your microphone and leave your camera off. But you do need you do need at least your microphone. You can't just have your camera, unless you sign language, but I don't know sign language. So Yana is here on the stage. I'm not sure if she wants to be included and come up for a question or not. But if anybody does, please feel free to click the button. I believe it'll say something about joining the stage. Or if not, just say it in the chat, your question in the chat. Or if not, then I guess we'll wrap up here. But I'll wait a moment to see if anyone has any questions. But Shawn, do you have anything to add? Anything neat going on? You know, I asked you a question in our private chat. I'm not sure if we're allowed to talk about that thing. Do you see it down there?
What thing? Oh yeah. We can talk about it. I forgot to bring that up.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Well, okay, so mystery revealed. There's a conference in the works. So Shawn, why don't you tell? I'm really interested in this. I'm going to be involved in it. I'm going to definitely be there, and I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, so it's part of the whole ecosystem we're trying to build. So again, COVID willing, the idea is to sort of aggregate what we do, science communication, STEM careers, and startups, into one yearly conference. We're going to call it Brazen Con. The analogy we'd like to use is South by Southwest of STEM, South by Southwest of STEM. And so it'll be those 3 tracks plus hopefully musical artists and things like that in Los Angeles every year. Now that's going to be a huge undertaking, and we are working with a partner in England to try to get that worked out, and hopefully as well as your fiance Bella, but who's an events person. But we are going to do a smaller event in the spring, in June, hopefully again COVID willing, in association with the Bio Conference. It's going to be the Brazen Summit, and that's going to be more of a mastermind event centered around founder-led biotech. So it's going to be a little more niche, but it's sort of our proof of concept before we try to do a big Brazen Con. But yeah, that's something to look forward to, and hopefully the Discord will also be the central hub for that.
Sweet. Well, that's exciting. I'm going to bring Ricky on stage here.
Let's do it. Oh, that's Ricky.
Okay, let's go. I'm going to hit feature next. Oh, he's in the house.
There he is. What up, brother?
Not much. Just wanted to ask questions and try out some new features on this thing. You know, a little bit of everything.
Are you in a hammock right now?
Yeah. This is my studio hammock.
Oh man, I have one of those, but it's only outdoor.
At my old place, I had to go into the walls, but here it's a little nicer. So
it's a coat hook.
Yeah. Is it a coat hanger? You're gonna have to send me a photo of that.
No, you can buy this on Amazon, but I don't.
It's
just a regular hammock stand. Yeah, I use it as a coat hanger sometimes, but that's the whole thing.
I thought it was just a normal stand-up coat hanger. Well, welcome, Ricky. What's going on? Thanks for joining us on stage.
Yeah, so I had a question. I was wondering, Shawn, you're big in this startup space, especially for biotech. Are there any startup biotechs that are going on now that you think are like particularly cool, or ones that have happened in the past that you think got off to a start in a cool, unique way, or had a cool or unique product that they were bringing to patients?
Yeah, so great question. There are tons out there. I frankly haven't been able to keep up. It's sort of something that I don't want to do. I have a unique approach, as I mentioned before, with our accelerator. I believe everyone who has the science background who wants to start a company should be able to. And so currently, with the venture capital, there's a lot of pressure to get returns for the investors, and so only certain areas are hot, and so all the money, for instance, is going to CAR T or immunotherapy, which is great because I believe in that stuff too. But there's a lot of stuff that doesn't get attention, and so for me, like I said, it's mostly about the founder. I love all the science; it's all cool, and there's so much cool stuff going on. And Shawn, our other friend, does a clubhouse every Wednesday on this type of stuff. It's hard to keep up with, but again, for us at Brazen Bio, all about the founders. We just want to help them translate their science.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll hop off stage and let y'all finish up.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.
Nice to see you.
Ricky. See if you can figure out how to leave the stage. There's a button for it.
Get out.
Yeah. Well, I can boot him, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to be rude about it. But yeah, well,
look at that picture.
So I have no other questions. Yeah. He looks great. He should be in a hammock in that photo too, though.
For sure.
Yeah, I have no further questions. I really, I hope this was informational for people. I'm really intrigued by your story and inspired by it. Truly, I really am. It's like what I said, it inspires me to realize that, there's always ways to continue making an impact. And,
Absolutely.
There can be multiple levels to that over time. So I want to thank you for joining me here today and for bearing with me too on my first live streaming event, which I think went pretty flawless as far as technical issues, except for my dog, who has now settled down and is now going to get a walk. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to BrazenCon.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity. This was really fun, and look forward to the next episode.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.